Welcome to Your Wise Self with Sarah, the podcast that invites you to embark on a journey of self-discovery, growth, and transformation. Thank you for joining me, Sarah, as I explore the profound wisdom that resides within each of us, waiting to be uncovered and embraced. Today, we are exploring the 3 principles, a journey to inner transformation with Scarlett Lunning. Scarlett is a mediator, trainer, facilitator, and coach. She is the owner of Lunning Coaching and Consulting, a business she began in 2015 after 15 years of working for Iowa Mediation Service. As a mediator, facilitator, and trainer, her practice is based on the understanding of the 3 principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. She is passionate about each of our capacities to shift negative self-perceptions to healthy and light-filled mental states. Currently in her work with EFR's Employee Assistance Program, she provides trainings, facilitations, and mediations. Scarlett also contracts with the West Des Moines Police Department. There she serves as a facilitator and conflict resolution coach for individuals and families through the West Des Moines Police Department's Youth Justice Initiative. Her byline is lifting limits, creating connections. Welcome, Scarlett.
Thanks, Sarah. It's just a huge pleasure to be here.
I have been so looking forward to this conversation with you because we've had many conversations over the last couple of years. I really want to first take the opportunity to share about how we met and give a little background before we dive into the 3 principles. So growing up, I was introduced to the 3 principles. My stepdad, his name is Todd. Todd unfortunately passed away in 2017 to frontal temporal dementia. But I grew up knowing and understanding what the 3 principles were because he talked about them often. I think that the 3 principles were coined as the 3 principles more recently.
It was called health realization for a while.
Yes.
Exactly.
Health realization was what I knew it as. And oftentimes we had many conversations around thought created reality. I was 15 when my mom and my stepdad got married. And so it really impacted me and made me think, especially at a time in my life where it was really important to learn these values and understand what thought created reality is. And also we talked a lot about self-fulfilling prophecies that related to think about reality and what is reality. And then did we make it into reality based on our thinking? And so I grew up with this. And then a couple of years ago, I walked into a training for leadership development for my current role at the hospital I work in. Come to find out this entire day of training was dedicated to mental health. And I didn't know that when we went into it. And mental health is obviously extremely important to me. And I walk in and I see this lovely woman standing at the front of the room, Miss Scarlett Lunning. You started talking and I think my heart soared out of my chest because first of all, I'm a big believer that the universe, God, whatever people believe, drops people into our life right at times when we need them the most. It's a very clear connection that we had. And when you started talking about the 3 principles, here I was 30 years later. I had never had anybody else talk about the 3 principles or health realization. And so when you started talking about it, I just knew that we were going to be connected. And so since then, we've met several times, had some really fantastic conversation, shared resources, shared books. So I'm just really looking forward to hearing more about your background, about your journey with the 3 principles, and then sharing some of those resources with the audience listening today too.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, and first, I want to say what a wonderful moment that was for me. In the first place, I walked in and all the leaders, I think that the goal was for everybody to be at tables, and they were kind enough to put everybody just in chairs in a circle, which is a lot of people to do a circle with. And so I've got to admit, I wasn't positive how it would go. And to have somebody come up to me in the middle, have you come up to me in the middle and say, I've heard this before. It was my stepdad. And I thought, my gosh, how was he introduced to it? And you said that he had been in Minneapolis and that was the group that he'd heard it from. And Minneapolis was definitely a place where the 3 principles was growing. It had definitely happened in Des Moines, probably a decade, 2 decades, maybe after Minneapolis got it. So anyway, what a gift and so fun to know you and a fellow cohort. in regards to the three principles, I was working at Iowa Mediation Service at the time, and my next door neighbor had been working when she was in Denver, and she was in charge of staff that went out to new moms who had challenges, and she had this group from California come and train these staff to help the new moms, and it totally changed their culture and the capacity for them to look at the new moms as totally whole and capable of being good moms, and it really did well. So she said, I'm going to get it to Des Moines, and she was in charge of a small clinic here in Des Moines and was working with United Way and Iowa Health Systems, which is now Unity Point. I can't remember all the things, but they got a grant to bring this group in, and she called and said, oh, they're coming. And then I said, oh, I don't think I can give up. I think it was 3 or 4 days. I know it was at least 3 days. And I think I probably already know it. You know, I've been through so many trainings. I think I probably know it. And so I said, oh, I just can't right now. So I let it go. And about maybe a year, 2 years later, I was mentoring or supervising an MSW student with the University of Iowa. Her name was Karen, and she was wonderful to deal with, a great spirit. And I saw the difference she made in our office manager, who was just not an easy person. She was very unhappy and pretty much spewed that unhappiness out towards others. I'm sure that wasn't on purpose, but basically, you know how vibrations are. And she started to shift, and she was lighter when she interacted with Karen. So then Karen said, you've got to go to the next training. So I thought, yeah, I need to. And I was at that time working with YJI. I'd helped Claudia, who was then the director of Youth Justice Initiative with the West Des Moines Police. I'd helped by writing the first grant for that. So we talked frequently, and I says, okay, you're coming to this training with me. And so for 3 days, three principles was shared. And I was so excited because I had always been uncomfortable with mental health diagnosis because I see how people slap that diagnosis on their chest, and that's who they become, and it sort of stops them in their tracks unless they're able to get out from under it. So to know that everybody has innate mental health, it's just under unhealthy thinking, was a huge gift to me. And so I saw that right away. So I would run around the house, and any tasks that I saw that I normally hated, it's only a thought. It's only a thought. Now, I've got to admit that there's some habitual thoughts that I still am trying to get over and shift to another thought. Like I still am not all that excited about unloading the dishwasher and doing laundry. However, I know it is my thinking, and it's an old habitual thought that I've had for a while. So if it's really important, I need to do something about it. So anyway, knowing the three principles of mind, thought, and consciousness, we shared it with the young people at YJI. We shared it with the parents who work with their children, and we shared it with the people who work with those kids. And they started to see their thinking. For instance, when kids get in trouble with the law, but I remember getting a call from the police that my son had been involved in something and that there needed to be some kind of an interaction. Luckily, it was not a big program, but it was a shock. And you get fearful. You think, oh my gosh, he's going down the wrong path. What am I to do? And we start to try to control instead of to understand, to have faith that our kids are pure, that they can figure out their lives and they can become accountable for their actions. It proved so helpful to our families and everyone that the organization got a Chiefs Award, a National Chiefs Award. And then also several years we've had no recidivism. So it's been a wonderful journey. At the time when I first learned the principles, there were so many people in the community. And when you are in the group of people knowing that they are creating their life via their thoughts, that's not via our circumstances, it's really a wonderful support, and it causes the vibes and the energy in the area to go up. Not that we don't still go down into difficult situations, to know that we have more agency than we thought we had. When we think that our life and difficult things that happen are things that make us a victim, then we get stuck in that role. If, however, we look at that as, I can think about this in a different way, and probably one of my best examples of that is I was married at the time to a very lovely man. He had his master's in public relations, was just really fun. His problem is that he was very addicted to alcohol. I would come home at night and he would be passed out. And in the past, past, in that codependent role, I would say, okay, what can I do to try to control and fix this situation? Instead, after learning the 3 principles, I thought, well, okay, so he's made this choice and he's not able to be a regular partner tonight. I can still have a nice night. I can be loving towards him and just let him sleep away on the couch and either have dinner with a friend, do some work, read a book, watch a TV show. There are lots of options to shift our perception from focusing on the really tough stuff that's going on in the moment. And so that was a huge help to me in just recognizing our agency in being able to be okay when we're going through difficult times. And I'm guessing that a lot of you found this when you were going through the situation of COVID. The 3 principles of mind, thought, and consciousness are really who we are. They're in all of us. We're always, except for the fact that we forget that we have this power, we weren't told we had this power, which is mind. And we do know that we have the capacity to think. However, we thought how we think is right. And then all of a sudden you find out, whoa, that belief I have about myself or about other people is not particularly true. And so you're able to then through your feelings, because you know when you're in a good feeling that is not particularly created by alcohol or the best chocolate in the world, but you're just in a good, peaceful feeling, that's when your thoughts are aligned in a wonderful way with the universe.
I love it. You've made a few key points there. The first being that we're all human. So we all have something that we don't love doing, whether it's emptying the dishwasher or putting away the laundry or going to the grocery store, whatever it is. Reframing. It sounds like it's a reframing process. I'm trying to define this in some way or give some words behind it because it sounds like reframing using mindfulness tools is part of this process. And then the other thing that I'm hearing is not making assumptions about what's going on with other people and focusing on our own thoughts versus what other people's thoughts are. And that's also another book that I oftentimes suggest for people. I'm sure we've talked about that, the 4 Agreements.
The 4 Agreements, yes.
Yes. So the 4 Agreements, and one of them being not to make any assumptions, gave us a lot of great thought processes to start working through the idea of what it is and some personal experiences and transformative moments that you've had.
The most challenging aspect of sharing this understanding is it's behind the words. It's not the word themselves. Words really don't teach. It's how you make sense of them. So mind could be considered God, the universe, that intelligence that beats our heart, that keeps us breathing, that is there even after we die. That part was helpful for me to understand and also resonated with me. I'm a daughter of funeral director. My grandfather was a funeral director. My uncles were funeral directors. And so I saw so many dead bodies. And it was so clear that the energy that enlivened that body was no longer there. And it was difficult for me to think that it wasn't still around. So when I was a child, it was heaven. And who knows me, I don't know if I still put a label on it. I just know that nobody dies. So you've got mind. And then we have this capacity to think. We have thought with a big T. If we think of everything, think of the pyramids, think of computers, think of the fact that Sarah and I are able to talk to you. Sarah and I we're in the same state, but we're not in the same room. And it doesn't matter because you're able to access this, not just in the moment, but you'll be able to pull up this podcast anytime you want to, or any podcast anytime you want to. So our capacity to create thought is phenomenal. The deal is we have free will, so we can own any thoughts we want to own. And as we are children growing up, we start creating the idea of who we are. And we create those ideas about who we are from a lot of false information. I remember the story of a mom who was just really upset one day and her daughter was singing and she just needed some peace. I don't know if she had a headache or what. And she said, "Stop singing. I don't want to hear that voice." So the little girl thought forever that she couldn't sing and it wasn't the truth. So thought is our capacity to create our life through deciding what kind of thinking will be helpful to me now. If I'm in a bad feeling, what kind of thinking will help? Consciousness is that awareness of what's going on, awareness of what our feelings are, awareness of the thinking that's going on. And so you've heard people rising in their consciousness about life and about themselves. There's no roof on it. We can constantly learn more things about ourselves and become more peaceful and let go of more difficult thinking if we just let ourselves get quiet off and on. People sometimes do it through meditation. Sometimes people do it through yoga, as Sarah's a wonderful yoga instructor. So mind, thought, and consciousness, which as you see just from my explanation, that you cannot have one without the other. There used to be that little ditty, you can't have one without the other. And that is so true. That's a lot of words for three huge things.
I think you did just a beautiful job of explaining it when you were talking about mind and that being God, universe. It almost sounds like it could be part of our soul. So you were talking about a body, and then when a body dies, there's still a soul, perhaps. The body might be gone, but there's still the mind and soul.
That is our soul. How oftentimes do we think that we're not going to experience our soul till we die? And so we just sort of leave it alone. And what we're taught in the world to do, which is look outside. What's the weather going to be? I'm going to feel as the weather is. And it's not just the weather in the environment. What's the weather in my office? I've got to align with, if it's a negative energy, I'm going to align with that. So we have been told that it all has to do with the outside world. Your day has to do with how everything else goes outside of you.
And the observation that I make with that truth, my truth, is that when I feel that outside, that's part of what brought me to meditation, was when I close my eyes, it's my opportunity to peer inward. And really that's what yoga training and yoga therapy taught me, really, was to learn to go inward, but not only just to go inward, but to be able to sit with those feelings, because that is the hard part. People had the tendency that we want to avoid what's inside. So what you're saying is we go to outside things, which also can turn into addictions. And along the same lines, my stepdad was a recovering alcoholic. And I believe that's very much part of his story, was being a part of 12 steps and health realization and ultimately the 3 principles as a result of that. But it really helped him make that connection. And then you went into thought and the capacity to think our own thoughts and how there can be false information. Again, all these are really good lessons that people are just hearing this for the first time. You're right. It's 3 small words with great big concepts that help really guide people back inward and then to the consciousness part of awareness. And I think that's the other thing that I've really been learning, and part of my personal journey and my path is so much of it is awareness. And at the end of the day, we're still human. We're still going to have times that we don't want to empty the dishwasher. We're still not going to be perfect in our speech or not making assumptions, but we become aware of it. And I oftentimes, when I'm teaching about meditation, I use a rubber band concept. Your mind is going to wander. Just notice it and bring it back. And each time that rubber band gets a little bit shorter. And it's the same thing with awareness here. You become aware more often that what's happening outside of us and not allowing it to impact us and bring that rubber band closer and closer to ourselves. And then that allows that peering inward to see what's going on with us that's creating kind of that outward reality, which is back to what I was saying in the beginning about thought created reality.
Yeah, you hit it from the very outset. And one of the important things that I wish to let go of is when my thoughts are pulled in a direction that's not helpful and I'm feeling down, to not judge myself. And I appreciate you talking about, sitting with that feeling and letting it go, or diverting my attention when I'm not in a place where I can sit, and just even looking at the sky or petting my dog can just take me back to a better feeling. And then, so not to judge myself. Or even when I do a training that's just not my favorite expression of that, it wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be, to, give myself a buy and not overthink it and not take my training back into my life and dissect it and say, well, if you would have done that, and if you would have done that, then it would have gone better. To have faith that we are going to get closer and closer to that inside wisdom that's there, because we really draw it. I would bet everybody who is listening to this podcast has had a time when they were talking to a friend who was in distress, or they were talking to a child or someone at work, that they said the wisest thing to that person. And then they heard themselves say it, and then they thought, where in the heck did that come from? Because I think we all have access to this wisdom. And if we're ready to listen to it, as you know, our ego yells and our spirit whispers.
Isn't that the truth? Ooh, I got to write that down. Ego yells and spirit whispers. So what I'm hearing you also say is the epitome of why I'm in health coaching, why I'm doing this podcast. You just summarized all of it, Scarlett, into everybody having this inner wisdom. And then the word that came up for me was intuition, was we have this intuitive side of ourselves that allows space for us to understand something at a deeper level, whether it's about somebody else or about ourselves or a situation. The only way that we can really tap into that is by continually going inside of ourselves to continue to grow that awareness, grow that intuition, and knowing where our intuition comes from, because it can come from different perspectives for different people. Some people feel in their gut, or people, like you said, just say something, and it's very heart throat connected. And then there's this trusting that inner wisdom, trusting that intuition. What is important to me to share about what the three principles are, why we need to understand them, and then, how it applies to our daily life. So you really have given us some great examples.
We have that intuition, that strong spirit within us. Everybody else does too. I was recently coaching someone, and I was fearful because I could sense this person's anxiety. I had a sense that his past was filled with lots of difficulty. And so I got scared, and I did not bring my whole self. I brought tools and techniques, but I didn't say, one of the things that I really know here is that you have everything you need to be successful. And I want to tell you that I was not being as forthcoming, because sometimes it's not easy for me to explain this understanding. Just know that pattern that you say that is happening for you. What I see is that you have not trusted other colleagues, other people, because there have been so many times that you have had difficult experiences, and it's hard to see who they are. So we also have to look to, when our children are acting up, we have to look to who they really are. They have really strong emotions, and sometimes that comes out in behaviors that are not helpful. However, being punitive, definitely holding your ground and your boundaries and making sure that they understand the importance of being a part of your family, still letting them evolve until where they understand how they are creating their reality too. And they can deal with their experience of not getting 2 scoops of ice cream. After a while, they'll figure it out. Oh yes, mom says I can't have any ice cream until after dinner. But it's so easy. As a grandma, I can tell you, it's so easy to just give into those sweet ones because you don't want them to be upset with you. However, knowing they need you, having those boundaries helps them feel safe.
It is one of the greatest educations that we receive in this lifetime, is getting that, to have that role of parenthood or grandparenthood. But what you also said when you were sharing about your recent experience with that client was that what you wanted to share with him was that he has everything inside of him that he needs. About the three principles is that it's the wisdom of understanding your mind, thought, consciousness, and then trusting that inner wisdom, trusting that intuition, growing that, understanding that you have everything you need inside of you. And then that ultimately turns into that inner peace. And the inner peace and personal transformation component is what I believe that is at the heart of what you and I both are hoping to share, is everybody deserves to have peace.
That's so true. And so interesting that you say that, because when I asked this individual, so what is it that you really want in life? And that's exactly what he said. I want peace.
I think we all can relate to that.
Yeah.
Wow, super powerful. So thank you for sharing all of that. It sounds like you're helping clients overcome challenges with the three principles. You've definitely provided us some insights and realizations into the coaching process. What would be some advice for our listeners who are maybe interested in applying the three principles in their own lives?
Well, one, to know that you don't have to learn a lot of exercises. You just need to identify how I'm feeling, what belief lies behind that. Is that really a true belief? And then if you've decided it's true, so what do I need to do to feel better? I should probably share how this all started. It started from Sydney Banks, who lived in Canada, was from Scotland. He had been adopted by parents that he thought were very harsh. And so he had this idea of himself that he was really insecure. And somebody said to him one day, you know, Sid, I don't think you're insecure. I think it's just your thinking. And that totally led him into what ended up being a connection with spirit. He looked out at the ocean and all of a sudden he had an enlightened experience. I did not change that much when I learned. I might have changed my actions, and I definitely felt lighter and happier and more hopeful for everybody that's gotten a diagnosis about something. But he was so changed that when he went back to work, they didn't recognize him.
Wow.
And he talked differently. So he said to his wife, this was a ninth grade educated welder, he said, we're going to change the world. We're going to change psychology. Well, psychology wasn't real up to being changed right away, but he did get the ear of some psychologists whose lives changed because of their connections to Sid. And then it's just grown. So now there are millions of people around the world that the three principles has been their greatest gift. You know, there's a woman in England who's helped people in prisons throughout the country, and all sorts of wonderful things happening, all sorts of awakenings that people are having. And it's easier to talk about it now because they're not just three principles people who talk about this in this way. As Sarah sort of points out, the yoga community, which has always been a part of recognizing what's going on with thought. Can you say, does it tell people that they're innately mentally healthy?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how to put it in terms of innately mentally healthy, but what I would say is that the philosophy behind yoga therapy is that we as humans are always going to experience suffering. So it's about utilizing skills and tools to be able to make that suffering less. We can utilize tools such as mindfulness, meditation, and yoga to do all the things that we've previously spoke about going inside and checking in with ourselves and experiencing what's happening on the inside versus going to the outside for the answers. My very first podcast episode was about the vagus nerve and how that helps us. Yeah. And how that helps us with the autonomic nervous system, because sometimes things are happening in our body and we're not even really aware that they're happening because we're in this fight or flight mode for whatever reason or for many reasons. And so it's really about not necessarily being innately mentally well. It's that we can all achieve it with these tools and resources because we are all humans. So we know that we're going to have these times where things feel off or don't feel aligned. And so these things can help bring us back to that baseline.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So it's just understood that we can help to heal ourselves emotionally and physically via getting quiet and tapping in and identifying how our body movements can get us more connected to spirit in a way.
Yes.
If that makes sense. I don't know if they say that, but that's what it sounds like to me.
And our spirit is really just the essence of who we are. And like what we were talking about, it goes back to soul and mind and all the things that create who we are at birth versus what the stories of people telling us as we grow up. And the example you gave was a perfect example of the woman who never would sing again after hearing one time. And it was just what she thought about that situation.
Right.
It wasn't truth. It wasn't the reality of what her mother intended at that time.
And our past does not define us. So those thoughts we have about what our personality is, that can shift too. So you don't have to just go into victimhood because somebody said I'm this way. If that's a way that's not working for you, you don't have to hold on to it. We do have neural pathways, of course, that get sort of locked in. So we have to really shift that by pretending we're somebody different.
Well, this is amazing information that we all can learn from. And I think that part of it too is I've been on my journey, and maybe you have this similar experience. It's what you alluded to in the beginning of our talk today, is that I've been to so many trainings. I feel like I've learned so much. With each of these learning opportunities, it's almost like a puzzle in my mind. I feel like all these different pieces and these different components can speak to us and help us build that inner wisdom, help that intuition. What is out there for us to read or study if we want to know more?
Three Principles Global Community. So 3pgc.org. Videos from Sid. You can hear videos from in the Three Principles community. And then there are lots and lots of books. I think it's really wonderful to go back to some of Sid's books. My favorite is The Missing Link, which is like a little book of the philosophy of the three principles. So you can find these on Amazon. If I were you, I'd check out the 3pgc.org and listen to people, and the ones that resonate with you, see if they've got a book, because so many of them do. Jack Pransky has several books. George Pransky has a book about relationships. And then there are communities online on Facebook. In Des Moines, Iowa, has a Three Principles Network. And if you put in Des Moines, I think it comes up. One of the people that's been really helpful to our community is Dr. William Pettit, who is a psychiatrist. And he has a wonderful story of his marriage was falling apart and he was miserable and angry a lot of the time. And he listened to Sid, and that really changed his life. So he's been able to help people with like several mental health hospitalizations all of a sudden figure their way out and may have happy lives.
Wonderful resources. And I will definitely make sure that we get all those put into the show notes. I just am so grateful for the time with you today and your insights and your wisdom on the three principles. I wanted to thank you for making an impact on the world, but I think the more appropriate word is the softening that you're making in the world. That is just a beautiful thing. So I'm really grateful for your space in this world. And there's definitely a reason that you and I were brought together.
Yes. And I can't wait till the next time we get together. Thanks so much for this opportunity to spread the word, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Scarlett. Well, I'm going to encourage all the listeners to make sure that you give us a 5-star rating today for this lovely podcast episode with Scarlett Lunning, and continue to stay tuned and stay curious and open to new perspectives on your journey. Thank you, everybody.